Welcome again to this series. In this session, our house rules are as follows. Please keep your mics muted during the presentation and during all of the panelist discussions. Please ask your questions in the chat during and after the presentation. We do have someone who is monitoring the chat and they will provide the questions to Dr. Silver at the end. Remember that the golden rule rules, and we are looking forward to making sure we all have a great time. And I'll turn it over to Derek, and Derek, just give me 1 second to make sure you have sharing privileges. But you can go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to briefly take off my mask. I'm in a facility where I'm supposed to keep it on, but just while I'm speaking, I'll violate a little protocol, but I would encourage you all to continue to be vigilant as we continue to navigate these pandemics, especially this coronavirus pandemic. There are spikes in most of the places where you are. And so good practices of social distancing, hand washing, and all the rest will help us get through this. I come to you with greetings on behalf of the American Association of Blacks in Higher Ed, where I serve as the current president. And I want to share with you real quickly a brief video that highlights some of our activities. I know many of you have been with us, and so you're very familiar with what I'm sharing. But for any of our guests who aren't, this is who we are. This is our website, AABHE.education. I will put it in the chat in a little bit, but I want to share this video quickly with you.
The American Association of Blacks in Higher Education invites you to participate in the online AABHE Education and Engagement Series. This webinar series features some of the most distinguished Black voices in higher education.
You gotta have people understand finances. You gotta understand relationships. You have to have folks that are technology savvy. But also you gotta have leaders who are smart enough to put people around them that's smarter than them.
These impactful discussions are designed to inform, provide insight, and inspire all who participate. The AABHE has a rich history of representing African Americans in higher education on a national and international levels. AABHE is an individual and institutional member-based organization that provides a wealth of information through various signature programs. For more information about AABHE or to register for one of our Lunch and Learn webinars, visit aabhe.education.
So I will drop in the chat the website link, and for those of you who are not familiar with our organization, that little snippet shows off certainly this online series, which is why you're here. But we have a wealth of other programming and opportunities, including our annual conference that we will hold next year, March 14th through 16th. It will be a virtual conference and a great opportunity for you to continue the conversations that begin today. We will also have our Leadership Mentoring Institute, which is a professional development program that will commence in the summer. Virtual or not, we will have a program next summer for you. Dr. Silver, who you will hear from shortly, has been leading for a number of years a very, very successful international study tour. We were scheduled this summer to have gone to Ethiopia and Dubai. But because of the travel restrictions, we pushed that back to 2022. It's a wonderful time to learn, to grow, and to experience foreign countries. So lots and lots of things happen. We've got a career website. We've got tons of opportunities for you. So if you enjoy what you see today, please stay in touch and take a look at our membership opportunities, which I will drop in the chat. Thank you so much and have a great webinar.
Thank you, Dr. Rivera. We appreciate very much your comments, and the video was absolutely great. We are excited today to have a great panel discussion looking at the coronavirus, the pandemic, and the impact on instruction at our colleges and universities around the country. We have a great slate of panelists for you. They come from a varied background. They're all seasoned professionals, and they're ready to answer all questions that you have related to the teaching and learning in the new normal that we have. So today we have Dr. Evelyn Fields from South Carolina State University, Dr. Jennifer Ellis from the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, Dr. Imani Scott from the Savannah College of Art and Design, and Dr. Shawnee Howard Baptiste from the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. I'm going to ask each of them to give maybe a 1-minute introduction of themselves in a more detailed way, anything they want to share with the audience before we get started. So we'll start with Dr. Fields.
Okay, well, good afternoon. My name is M. Evelyn Fields, and this is my 20th year at South Carolina State University, where I'm a professor of early childhood education in the Department of Teacher Education. I'm a former chair of the department, a former associate provost for faculty and programs. I'm a former chair of the faculty and a former professor of the year. And I am the immediate past president of AABHE.
Thank you. Dr. Jennifer Ellis.
Hi, everyone. I am Jennifer Ellis. I'm a proud Tuskegee alum. It's our homecoming weekend, so I want to make sure I get that out there. Happy homecoming. I am an associate professor here at UTC in the School of Education and the director of STEM education. And I also am a mom of a 4.5-year-old. He will make sure I say 4.5-year-old. So juggling teaching, administration, and a young child who is in school, but also gets picked up early, and all that, the loveliness of that, and teaching around all of that is one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of share some of my best practices that has helped me remain sane.
Thank you. Dr. Scott. Unmute yourself.
Okay, wonderful. Hi, so I'm Imani Michelle Scott, and I have been teaching in higher education for a long time. I actually did the math this morning, and I'm hoping that you can hear me because I'm getting a note here that says I need to unmute. Okay, wonderful, thank you. And so I've been teaching for over 30 years now, and I am a proud member of AABHE and also a member of the board. I am delighted to be here. I think that this is a very necessary conversation, especially as we're dealing with a series of pandemics, not just the COVID, but as Dr. Riveros mentioned in his recent article in Diverse Issues, we've got the weather pandemic, we've got the political pandemic, we've got the race pandemic, we've got the economic pandemic. So I am just delighted to be here. I have a background teaching in intercultural skills and also communication skills. So wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Howard Baptiste.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shawnee Howard Baptiste. I'm an associate professor here at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga in the Department of Health and Human Performance. And I also serve as the interim program director. And so I'm excited to share insights and ways to pivot and support all of our AABHE members and friends. And my baby right now is an accreditation report that I've been working on tirelessly for the last couple of weeks. So I'm looking forward to submitting that very soon and focusing on self-care. So welcome, everyone.
Well, again, welcome to this very distinguished panel. We have Caraway and Associates in the background monitoring the chat room, and also they have been very, very helpful in terms of the registration process. And one of the things that we noticed, we have a large number of non-AABHE members on this Zoom platform today. We really encourage you to join the organization and become one of the ones whose voices are heard in higher education. We thank you so very much for tuning in today. As our president indicated, this is a series that have been going on the pandemic. And today we're going to be focusing on teaching and learning and the challenges in the pandemic. So one of the things that we heard early on is the balance piece. How do you balance the teaching, the research, the homes, and other kinds of things that attract your attention and demand your attention during this pandemic? So who wants to start with that one? Is it Dr. Jennifer? You're going to start with that?
Sure. You have to make a list of what your priorities are. And what I have learned through the years is I have always put myself and my health last. And so this academic year, and especially during COVID, I got sick early in March, and I thought I had coronavirus, but thank the Lord it was a negative test. And so that let me know health is wealth, and that's what's most important. And so I've been very conscious of making sure I put my health first, by making sure I start my day off outside of, taking my son to work. Dr. Howard Baptiste and I, we walk every day just to make sure I'm starting with me and making sure my mental clarity, walking outside, getting fresh air is very critical. So that's kind of where I start, and just kind of, making sure you take care of yourself first. And then when I'm looking at just the balance of all of the roles that we all play, is what is most important, and just prioritizing those things and working down my list. And of course, being an excellent teacher is one of those. That's one of the reasons why UTC is more known as a teaching institution, although we do a lot of research, making sure that no matter whatever modality I'm using, my students get a very enriched experience, be it face-to-face or whatever model that I'm choosing to use. And so really looking at what it is that they're supposed to get from my course, and to make sure that they get it and check in with them as well. So really trying to balance those things. And then, the child and all of those different roles is really tapping into your village. And it's okay to say, I need help. And utilizing tools like FaceTime is a wonderful thing, and teaching your child to be, thankfully I have a 4.5-year-old who's very independent and knows how to advocate for himself as well. And so using different tools to help engage them. And so they're not just in front of a TV, but doing things that are also stimulating to them. And then also telling them and talking to them, although mommy is home, mommy still has to work. I am not a stay-at-home mom. I'm a working mother. And so explaining to him, what does that look like? And, explaining the role that my husband plays and why he can't be here. So really educating everybody about this is a new normal, and this is kind of how we have to function.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going
Can I add to
go over.
that?
Yes, sure.
Okay, so I just wanted to add, and just to sort of build on what Dr. Ellis said, I think a part of taking care of ourselves also is knowing how to set boundaries and how to have healthy boundaries. Because one of the things I've realized is that I can become overcommitted, and I am the kind of person, like I'm sure many of us are here on this call, my word is my bond. So if I say I'm going to do something, I want to make sure that I do it. But oftentimes just learning when I need to set boundaries, especially with students. For example, if I'm teaching 3 classes and I've got 90 students and they all want individual attention, that can be really challenging sometimes. So I go to those shutdown modes, building once again on what Dr. Ellis said, the going for the walks, I think is an amazing thing to do. But also I think trying to find, and this might sound a little bit weird, but some beauty in the madness. As an example, one of the beautiful things is that I've also been able to work more in my garden. I've been able to remodel different parts of my homes. I've been able to start a couple of projects, personal writing projects that I wanted. So trying to find a little bit of beauty and sunshine in the darkness, I think also helps. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Fields, you indicated early on that you had been in the business, at least over at South Carolina State, for some 20 years. And so you've been involved in teaching and learning in various modalities. But what can faculty do to make this remote teaching more effective? Unmute yourself. Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, I think one of the main challenges is getting the students motivated show up and participate. So that kind of brings us then to deciding what we're going to teach. So because we have to really inspire them to participate, we can't use the same approach that we basically use when we're teaching face to face, because a lot of us are just kind of lecture oriented. And if that's the case, we're going to end up losing them very quickly. The students need opportunities to be able to listen and then to actively process the information that's being presented. So we want to, in the middle of our lectures, we want to make sure that we're stopping to ask viewpoint questions and to get some immediate feedback. We might want to provide some anecdotes for the discussion, do some breakout sessions and breakout rooms so that we can encourage some cooperative learning. And we need to figure out how to make those subjects that are more in-depth, to make them a little bit more simple. Because the research does show that we don't want to offer too much new material at one time when we're using these type of platforms. We want to mix the new material with material for review. So we're connecting new content with old content, and then we want to provide some examples. Even though our students are kind of, this generation, they're tech savvy. They know everything about, what's going on the web. So, but we don't want to show too many videos. Don't want to get bogged down in YouTube or too many apps or too many platforms that last more than about 15 minutes. Because again, the research shows that we begin to lose them that way. They become a little bit overwhelmed. And so we want to try to limit some of that activity. And that, beginning, that's just a few ways to begin to start to connect our students with the mode of teaching that we're using.
Well, thank you. I know that Dr. Ellis spoke about the walks in the morning with Dr. Howard Baptiste. So Dr. Baptiste, Howard Baptiste, what are some of the other strategies that you engage in as it relates to self-care and even with the family?
That's a great question. Thank you, Dr. Silver. And yes, Dr. Ellis and I walk for at least, I'd say about 45 minutes to an hour each day. I think some of us are on that kind of 10 to maybe 6 or 7 o'clock schedule. And so one strategy that we utilize is we try not to schedule meetings before 9:30 or 10 o'clock. And I know that's difficult for a lot of people, but if you can, we set that time aside. I think having an accountability partner, particularly someone that understands the trials and tribulations of higher education and kind of what the demands are at this time. So making at least an hour and commit to that hour every day. Each of us deserves 1 hour each day to focus on self-care, whether that's meal prep, catching up with family and friends. But I think the main thing that we do is we are intentional to set that time. So whether that's 6 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night, we also utilize, as Dr. Ellis stated, our Apple watches. And so when those little rings, for those who have Apple devices, when those little rings go around to remind you, okay, it's time to stand, or remind you to drink some water, or to get your steps in. So having those, whether it's technology or family and friends, having those accountability partners are really important. So yes, we're very intentional to try to close those rings each day.
Well, let me go back to Dr. Ellis. I just happen to know that Dr. Howard Baptiste and Dr. Ellis engaged in leading a writing boot camp this summer in the midst of this pandemic. So Dr. Ellis, with all you got going on, how do we work smarter in this pandemic than we did maybe in terms of some of the other modalities that we used?
That's a good question. So one of the things that what I'm trying to do is, again, learning to better advocate for myself within the confines of what's already allotted to me. So I did apply last academic year for a sabbatical. So I will be on sabbatical, thank you, Jesus, in the spring. And so I'm right now preparing my graduate students and myself for what does that look like. I've also learned that through, I'm PI on 3 current NSF grants, co-PI on 2, and senior personnel on another. And so with that, I was ignorant to what all that brings. And so now that I am more aware of what release time is and what does that look like, learning to use that to my benefit so I can advance my career writing wise. And so really learning the rules, I think, is in asking questions is very important to be able to take your time back. And the other thing that Dr. Howard Baptiste and I do is block off times on our calendar, because people will go to your Outlook calendar and say, oh, it looks like you're free between such and such and so and so, and you're really not. I mean, you really do need to make sure you carve out time to be intentional to write. And so making sure you do that, even if it's a recurring meeting on your calendar, protecting your time, because people will abuse your time and deter you from what is most important, which is your career.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Scott, earlier you talked about having 3 classes and 90 students and trying to develop those boundaries. But at the same time, I know you and I know how you are an advocate for students. So how do you identify and support students in this time of the pandemic, knowing that they already have financial issues, social issues, but now in this dual pandemic, they have issues related to race and gender. Talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so one of the things that I think that we need to accept as advocates of higher education is the fact that and I am really focusing right now just on Black students when I say this. So Black students tend to enter the higher education arena with a greater wealth of what are called ACEs, adverse experiences, adverse communication experiences, adverse consequences related to their experiences in the community. So they're exposed to higher levels of violence. And so one of those, of course, as we know, is the higher levels of police violence. And I think that those adverse experiences are hampered by the repeated exposure, once again, through like maybe social media. We're constantly seeing these. So Black students tend to enter the arena with a higher level of need, I think, than maybe students who are not Black or not minoritized. So one of the things that I try to do is to ask students at the start of each quarter. I will send an individual email or an individual correspondence. What can I do to assist you this quarter to help make this a positive learning experience for you? Another one would be to validate their feelings of a possible fear and possible inadequacy in this particular environment of systemic racism that we're living in. And one of the ways that I try to validate that is to share my own stories of concern and my own stories of my own fears of ambiguity about what's going on. So I think that validating their experiences, acknowledging that they entered the arena initially with some types of anxieties and fears and stressors that non-minoritized students don't enter the arena with are really important. I think inviting them to co-create assignments and co-create activities is really important, because academia tends to be very oppressive, very top-down. So we're telling them, this is what you must do, this is what you should do. Well, how about inviting them? How would you like to carry out this particular assignment? And I will tell you that I actually do that. I will change deadlines. I will structure my class so that it can be more accommodating to students who tend to be more highly stressed just coming into the arena.
While we're talking about students, Dr. Fields, can you speak to some of the strategies that you're using to engage students, to get them to be more vocal during this process?
Well, I find it helpful at least 30 minutes before my class meets to send out a new link, Zoom, Teams, whatever we're going to be on, whatever platform. Send that to my students at least 30 minutes before the class meets, because this is literally to remind them that they are to be present, visible, and ready to engage. And because they're busy Now, they're not necessarily busy doing what you want them to do, but they are in a different world. And that's one that doesn't have any limitations to their structure. They're not as structured because they are home. They're not in that environment because that environment that's conducive to learning. And I have to say that I'm speaking about this from the perspective of the fact that I teach at a small HBCU in rural South Carolina. And so I'll say from the beginning that not all universities are created equal. And that hasn't changed actually in the midst of the pandemic. And so our students tend to have some of the struggles that some students may not have. And because, like I said, they're home, they're not in a conducive learning environment. They sometimes when they come on, they're babysitting. It's not even necessarily their children. They're driving in the car. They're out in the yard. I've seen some at work. They're either like they're in the plant, in the store, while they're actually trying to zoom in for their particular class. And so simply just getting them to show up, that has been a challenge. Okay. So I, from the beginning, acknowledge the activities that they are engaged in. I don't pretend like I don't see what they're doing. We take time out to talk about it for a few minutes, and they talk about their particular situation. And I try not to make an issue of it unless it's really, really disruptive. I try to sympathize with their situation while not lowering the expectations for my class. Because the truth is, as we say in the South, they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. Students complain, and they complain about their parents. They say their parents don't get it. They don't acknowledge that they are scheduled to be in class. They want to send them on errands, give them jobs to do. We're in the middle of a discussion one time, and this young man's father came in and he said, "I thought you were supposed to feed those horses. Why haven't you fed the horses?" And so he now is completely discombobulated, thrown off, because sometimes the parents think that they have free time because they're home. They're not even supposed to be in class and online. And they tell me, "Dr. Fields, you don't understand. You just don't understand." So that's the initial challenge is, and when I see them trying to struggle to connect, I try to think of an antidote that will draw them into the discussion by using the issue that's actually distracting them. And then, constantly reminding them of the information that they need as a prerequisite to move on to the next course, because that's very important to them.
That's a good segue into another question that I have. You're talking about all of the things they have to balance. So what are some of the strategies that can be provided? And Dr. Ellis, you might want to chime in on this. Strategies that students can provide, that you can provide students rather, when they feel overwhelmed, given all the things that Dr. Fields just talked about, and they're real. So how do you help students? What are some of the strategies that you could provide to assist them when they feel overwhelmed with all these things and more that Dr. Fields just talked about?
Just like Dr. Scott mentioned, really talking to your students, and Dr. Field as well, finding out what their issues are, and then helping provide some scaffolds so they can be successful. So if that's adjusting a deadline, sometimes just asking, like, where are you? What's going on? And then what I'll do is I'll even help them for major assignments. I'll carve out time during the class time to help them get started. Let's brainstorm. What are you thinking? This is what you need to do, to give them that push to realize I can do this and I can be successful, and I'll meet her expectations because we're working on this together. And so doing those different types of things, allowing them to see, I use a practice called Universal Design for Learning, allowing them to have the creativity to take their ownership of it and really allow them to see themselves and how it could be useful outside of this classroom really helps with the engagement. And then allowing them to see, how do you chunk this so you can be successful towards the end. So now we're towards the end of the semester. So each time we have class, I'll say, okay, this is what's due, and this is what's next, this is what's next, and that's it. And so for them to be able to see like that's it, and that we're almost done, has been really helpful and relieving for the students to be able to chunk things, put it in their calendar, and then I'll help them. Okay, just spend an hour on this. And then for my class, my students are content majors. So they're chemistry majors, biology majors, or math majors. And then my courses are more pedagogical with the STEM education. And so I ask them about all of their classes and how are things going in your main math classes? Do we need to change the date here? And then really allowing them to see the bigger picture and how they really need to start scheduling their time to be successful throughout the week. And so that has been helpful, just really having that ongoing dialogue with the students.
Thank you, thank you. We know that this is a tenuous time with the double pandemic, the virus and racism, Black Lives Matter, the protests, the whole 9 yards. Dr. Scott, I'm going to come back to you and just ask you, how do you balance the desire to address some of those concerns as well as get your subject matter taught? How do you creatively integrate these tense kinds of topics? You please unmute, we're missing you again.
There we go. All right. So one of the things that I'm really big on is helping students to find a sense of purpose in what they're doing. So trying to link their particular areas of study to whatever is going on in the world often helps, and to helping them to feel that they have a sense of, helping them develop a sense of responsibility about making our world a better place. So that's one of the things that I try to do, is to link assignments to what their specific interests are. I happen to teach public speaking and intercultural communication skills courses. And so in those courses, I allow students to select topics of interest to them, but the topics have to deal with something that's going on in our world today. So it's got to be something that's interesting to them. And it's also something that's dealing with social justice, for example, the human condition, dealing with cultural diversity, things that are actually happening in our world. And I also will start each class with the question, what do you want to talk about today? So no matter what I have on my agenda, if there's something going on in the world today, once again, I try to focus on cultural diversity, social justice, the human condition. What can we talk about that's really troubling you or bothering you today with regard to that? I saw someone sent into the chat a question about asynchronous courses, because all of our courses our students are not required to come to any face-to-face session. We are required to record every face-to-face session, and we are required to ensure that students have access to those recordings on a daily basis, the same day that the courses are offered. So for those particular courses, I try to be very detailed and specific about the assignments. I have to be especially clear in my writing, in articulating what assignment is due, when it is due, offering sample assignments to them so they can reference those assignments and see what an A assignment looks like or what a B assignment looks like. In the asynchronous environment, that is especially important. So I'm not sure if I directly answered your question, but that's how I try to accommodate that.
Yeah, I'm a people person, and most of you who know me know that, and so I like to hug, I like to talk, I like to do all these things. But it's been a great challenge in this pandemic, because normally I'm in the air twice a week, and I've just been home since February, working from the confines of my office where I am today. So I'm going to kind of pivot over to Dr. Howard Baptiste maybe can help me with this and help others on the line. I'm now challenged with, I got a mother-in-law who's approaching 90 and living in Charleston, South Carolina. I only seen her once since January. And how do you manage and to stay connected with family and friends during this COVID-19 virus?
That's an excellent question. One of the things that I think that is important to do is to show excitement where you are. So if that's on the phone with your mom or your mother-in-law at, 90 plus, is that people can hear and I think feel the excitement and passion that you have when you speak with family and friends. Dr. Ellis, I know, has some good examples of different games that her family's played that I've been invited on and that I've used with my own family. We have now, and the pandemic has showed us why we didn't do this before, is that every Friday night, I think it's 6 o'clock, we have a family Zoom call, and it's every single week. And we've been able to really consistently do that since late March. And physically seeing each other, my mom is 72. And at first, the technology was hard for her. She has a smartphone, but she didn't have a laptop. So when we first saw my mom, we saw the top of her forehead, but for her to be able to scroll through and just see all of her children, excuse me, that really got her excited because that was her way to kind of check in on everyone. And now my baby brother, who's in IT, he dropped a laptop off to her. She's set up, and now she's on the call, and she sends a group text, says, "Hey, where's everybody else at? It's 6 o'clock. It's time to get on the call." So that level of accountability with family and friends, I think, is really important. So one suggestion again would be set a designated time for people to check in. That it's a really good opportunity for family and friends, particularly family, to know that they can check in at that particular time. And there might be 2 people, it might be everyone, but there's going to be someone who's visibly and visually waiting to see you. And there's a lot of excitement in that. The other thing that we do is we play games. One thing that we also do is we tune out from the news and from social media. So have designated time that, some people want to check in or talk about the debates or talk about what's going on. So we have check-in time, but at a certain time of our hour together, we do something fun. We always end our calls with, "Tell me something good that happened this week." So it's whether, you got an email from a student or someone was really polite to you at the store, whatever it is, we always end on a positive note.
And this question is going to be really directed to the entire panel. Ask Dr. Fields to kind of start off, and then each of you can chime in after the respective persons have talked. We were thrust into, when I say we, I'm talking about higher education, was thrust into this at the end of spring semester. Students were on spring break. They were told not to come back. And all of a sudden, the whole world changed. Now we're in fall semester. And you're picking up the pieces that you've learned from spring semester, but guess what? As the flow goes, you got another semester coming up, and we're looking at spikes across the country, across the world. How do you prepare students, and how do you prepare yourself for spring semester?
Well, again, I don't want to be too redundant, but we have to start out by preparing ourselves. We're going to have that little intercession during that fall and spring semester, and we've got to regroup, give ourselves find ways to give ourselves more energy. If that is, and unlike I don't have a family, so I have a dog. Spending time just trying to relax, going on walks, as was mentioned, working out in the yard, doing things that's going to relax us, but give us energy. And so and then preparing ourselves emotionally. And that, and that includes resting, reading, and those sorts of things. And so I can't really underscore enough that the difference is sometimes when you're dealing with a certain population. And so again, because I teach at a small HBCU, we're at some universities, the responsibility might fall to different people to do different things. But at our university, faculty is intricately involved in everything as it relates to students' retention and matriculation through our institution. So when we start, we're all in, and it's basically, everything we're dealing with is in real time, and so we have to take the time prior to that to make sure we're prepared to come back, and then when it comes to our students, as I said, we live in rural South Carolina, so half the state doesn't even have broadband. Okay, so our students may be struggling with the hardware at the beginning. So we want to make sure that we're trying to contact those students early on. We want to give them as much time as we possibly can so that they'll know what the requirements are for the class and they can start to get prepared to do that. We want to kind of limit what we require as it relates to them accumulating any kind of finance expense, because the truth is they're limited when it comes to money. So
Okay, let's see if anybody else have anything to contribute on that particular question.
I can say something. I teach one of the courses that's like a lab course. And so one of the things that I've tried to do is create kits for my students. So when we're doing hands-on experiments, I don't make the assumption that they have Q-tips or whatever it is that we may be doing or building or something like that. So we have kits and they grab and go. And so that's what we're planning on now is, okay, for the spring, I'm just making the assumption, even though I'm on sabbatical, I still have to provide support the courses. I'm trying to be proactive to make sure the courses in the spring go well, even though I'm not going to be teaching. And so making sure we have the supplies, building the bags and things of that nature now to make sure that we can still provide the same quality of education in the event we are shut down again. And so this semester, we basically provided our students with, in all of our different courses, bags of resources. So at any moment the institution shuts down, we were able to continue on with our same level of instruction, hands-on, doing inquiry-based lessons, regardless of what they were doing, participating synchronously or asynchronously. The other thing that I've done is I've worked with our libraries to provide free textbooks. So they have that option, and so they're digital textbooks. So if I can find a free option that's available, and they actually found it for me. They contacted me and said, hey, Dr. Ellis, do you know your textbook we can provide to your students for free? Are you interested in doing that? Of course I am. So whatever I can do on my end to cut the cost and to make things more attractive for our students, that's what I do. And also to model for them, because I'm training future math and science teachers, how they too can do this, because this may be their new normal, and really helping them to kind of get that mind shift that they too need to be prepared to teach in this, in any modality, because that's what the teachers are doing now.
And as we wait to hear from Dr. Scott and Dr. Howard-Baptiste, let me say to our audience, if you have a question, we're monitoring the chat. Ms. Diala Plaskett is monitoring that for us. If you have a question, put it in the chat and we'll try to get to you. Dr. Scott or Dr. Howard-Baptiste, you want to respond to that question?
So I can go ahead and respond. I believe you were asking how we prepare for the spring quarter and also make sure that we're taking care of ourselves.
Yes.
So, right. So one of the things that I do, I love to laugh. And so I actually, because of all of the heaviness that is going on in our country right now, and because of the courses that I teach, and I have to be aware of what's going on in our country with the news and everything, it can get to be a bit much. So I make sure that I watch some of the comic shows or the comedians, the Colbert Report, or I'm sorry, not the Colbert Report, Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, so Trevor Noah, to try to add some sort of levity to what's going on. And then I actually bring clips of that into my classes sometimes. So it sort of helps to level set what's going on with the heavy duty stuff in society, and then trying to make a light of it and as a way to survive. I also allow myself, I should probably not admit this, but I allow myself to Netflix binge. And that's my one way of coping. And I will get hooked on a series and I will watch that endlessly just to try to make sure that I'm not once again becoming so overwhelmed with what's going on in the real world. One of the things I wanted to comment on, though, Dr. Silver, you mentioned earlier about being a people person. And so one of the things that I have found is I actually find intense value in office hours. So that might sound a little weird, but students in this particular environment, whether it's asynchronous or synchronous, will immediately want to go to email me. And I have started to offer extra credit if they will come to my office hours. So it's not going to negatively impact their grade if they don't, but if they do come to office hours, whether we're talking face-to-face, whether I give them a phone call, it's an opportunity to connect and to humanize myself to them. So I'm not just the professor on the other side of the screen, and I learn things about them from these conversations. So enhancing the opportunity for those sorts of interpersonal connections, I think, is a really important thing.
What is your protocol for having them come to your office though in this in pandemic?
So I have set office hours. So they are obviously, they're not going to be face to face as in we're sitting across from each other, except there's going to be this virtual thing. We got the computer here, but I will alter my office hours, or I will tell them if my office hours don't fit their schedule, maybe they're in China, and so their 6 o'clock a.m. is my 6 o'clock p.m. and so on. I've got to be a bit flexible with that, but just trying to make sure we can have this face-to-face connection, even if it is virtual.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
When face-to-face, so that's great. Dr. Baptiste Howard, do you have any
Yeah,
input on that? And
I was gonna
another question after you
add
finish.
Dr. Silver. So one thing that I use in my classrooms that worked really well this semester, I call it kind of the 3-1 model. So for my face-to-face classes that we'll meet for 3 weeks, but that fourth class period that we meet virtually. And so students find that in the syllabus, I label it as like a research class. So students are certainly still working. I still am in my physical office. Some of our classes are face-to-face, but it's a designated time where students say, have that space to really check in. The other week I asked my students, you know, how many people just need a day off from life? And I mean, literally everybody stood up and they were raising their hand. So it was like Dr. Scott said, like a lighthearted question, but certainly students needed some time to really focus on their mental health. The other thing that I do, it's similar to what Dr. Scott does. I call it a 10-minute talk show. So it's a standard time each week, usually 2 or 3 times a week, that's outside of office hours. So students don't feel like they have to talk about course related materials, but it's just the time that we can have some FaceTime and talk about whatever might be pressing upon them that particular week.
So here's another challenge that I had to deal with forthrightly. Those of you who really know me know that I have a bad habit of eating sweets. I love sweets. I would go from in a formal dinner setting, eat my sweets first before I eat my meal. It drives my wife crazy. But how do we manage in this pandemic? Because, you know, you're very close to the refrigerator, you got these snacks. How do you manage to continue to eat healthy and be healthy when you're trying to manage all this stuff and you got all this new time to yourself, but you still got to get things done? How do you manage that?
Well, I'm not a dietitian, and I'm like you, Dr. Silver. I've got my little Laffy Taffies. I've got my candy in arm's reach, kind of wherever I sit. So I know I'm amongst a good company. I would not say deprive yourself, right? That shouldn't consume all of our diet. But I feel, you know, at least my personal belief is, not a dietitian, but if you have, you know, a beverage of your choice, if it's got some antioxidants in it, that's even better, or some fruit, that's even better. Having a piece of chocolate, you know, if you can choose dark chocolate over milk chocolate. But I think it's portion control. So having a little piece of dessert, Dr. Silver, I think you're good. But as long as you're maintaining your hydration, you know, everybody probably has like a really nice water bottle or something that they're doing to stay hydrated, moving consistently. So if you have a device that kind of reminds you, okay, am I getting enough steps today? One thing that I do in my schedule, a former mentor told me, is to make an appointment with your middle name. And so at first I was thinking, what is she talking about? But if you schedule an appointment with your middle name, if you can every day, but if not every day, at least 3 or 4 times a week. So whether that's to eat lunch, to take a walk, to step outside, to do something for yourself that's uninterrupted. And what I've realized is that when people see that your schedule is blocked, like Dr. Ellis stated, they will find another time. They will choose another time to help accommodate everyone coming together for those meetings. So get up, move as much as you can. When it's a certain time to stop working, close your laptop. If you're working from home, put your laptop physically away, put it in your work bag, put it in a different space, so that those spaces that we're sharing, that you can start to separate the space that's for work, and now this is the space to engage with family and have dinner.
Anybody else want to talk about
Yeah,
that?
I will. So I don't know if you guys can see this. This is my little package of now and laters, and that tells my age. Okay. So I keep it right next to my computer. And I learned that I am addicted to now and laters, and I am addicted to goldfish. In fact, I'm probably keeping Pepperidge Farm in business right now, as many goldfish as I eat. But those are my comfort foods, right? And so I allow myself that. But I will tell you, it would not be unusual for me to be, I have a treadmill, I have a rowing machine, I have a bike, I go for walks. Every day I make myself do something physical. And I will watch one of my Netflix shows while I'm doing those things to sort of entertain me. But those are things that I allow myself because I feel like not only have I earned them, but I get the idea that comfort food is comfort food for a reason. So eat the chocolate, Dr. Silver.
Yeah, and I'm addicted to Twizzlers, but one of the things I've also started to do is to make sure that I, if I'm in meetings or if I was like participating as in a webinar, I just walk. I get my headphones on and I walk. So yesterday I had meetings back to back that that I had to be in there, but I had to be actively engaged, and so I walked literally for 2 hours, because if not, I'd be sitting for 2 hours. So I'm just making sure you're more proactive. And if you need to take a break, but something just to make sure, because you'll look up and you've been sitting in Zoom meetings for 6-7 hours. So really, and then get you a Twizzler or something and slide it up underneath your mask, or something, just so you can kind of have some comfort along the way.
All right, Dr.
So I
Perry.
guess my question is, how often do you eat these sweets throughout the day? Because I'm going to give you some practical advice.
Moderation is the key. Moderation. If you're eating, seriously, if you're eating a sensible lunch and dinner, you're eating fruits and vegetables, you're eating from the rainbow, you're not drinking your calories, you're not drinking soda and juice, and you have water with all of your meals, having, a little evening
Okay,
treat.
Shawani, I'm gonna tell you, he started out his question with, those of you who know me. Okay.
Carry on.
And so he's not eating from the rainbow. He's eating sweets, which I have in common with you. And so you might want to limit the amount that you actually bring into the house, to limit the amount that you actually eat, because
Tuesdays and Thursdays, Dr. Silver, Tuesdays and Thursdays.
But let me say this, I know this is going to surprise everybody, but I've really used the COVID environment to really bring more discipline to my health in terms of my eating habits. So now I do the smoothie things, and I've actually lost 12 pounds since February, and I'm just great about that. Yeah. And that was intentional. My doctor was just like happy. So here's what I want to do now. I want to pivot. We just have a few more minutes. I want each of you to spend maybe 1 minute, that would take us to our closing time, to give some best practice advice on teaching and learning in the midst of this pandemic. Your last nugget that you can give that somebody can hold on to as we close out. What is a best practice that we can engage in the teaching and learning space? Anyone who wants to start can start.
I'll start if you all don't
Just 1 minute.
So for me, I would say for best practices, and it was mentioned earlier, I would say 2 types of check-in. So have your check-in with your students and have your checklist. Oftentimes students, I think as Dr. Ellis had mentioned, feel overwhelmed. So when students come in and speak with me and they have a list of all the things that they're doing, it's really important to help them really sort out, is this something that you absolutely have to do? Is it tied to a degree requirement? It sounds like you could do this in the spring semester. You don't have to take that extra course this semester. Take this elective in the spring. So that's one strategy, is have that check-in as stated at the beginning of each class. So whether virtually or face-to-face, students will be very honest with you about how they're feeling. And if you get a sense and a pulse from the room that you need to deviate a little bit from the standard lecture, I think they'll be very appreciative and they'll have a better product at the end of the semester. So check in with them weekly and have your checklist to help support them and navigate through the end of the semester.
Fantastic. Next colleague, please.
So I will speak from the perspective of if I am having a face-to-face, if it's a synchronous section, or if I am recording, it's going to be seen later. I am really big on interactivity and engaging students. And so I believe strongly in the power of storytelling. I believe strongly in the power of inviting students to co-create assignments. And so literally I will ask students, I will say, well, this is what I had intended on doing today. What do you think about this? How can you add value to it? What would you change about it? One of the things that I've learned is that classes have personalities. And so in some of my classes, I will have, it's like crickets when I ask a question. So I have to actively engage them in group activities or actively engage them in partner or buddy activities. So being really focused on actively engaging students, actively asking them to be a part of their own learning, holding them accountable for participating and speaking up in class. That's another thing I offer extra credit for. If you actually contribute your thoughts and your ideas, so they're not just sitting there and I'm not just looking at a blank screen, and I have them involved. So I would say that those things really work for me.
Okay.
What I found is I also function as a program evaluator. And so I do that, and I think of evaluation as an iterative process. So I'm constantly looking at my syllabi, reviewing the course, and really thinking about what are the specific learning objectives of this course? What do my students need to do to demonstrate mastery of these particular learning objectives? And then what else is currently included in here can I remove or make an in-class activity to make sure that they get that experience, but it's not so cumbersome on me as the one who has to grade it, and also on them who actually has to do it outside of class. And so what can I do to build within the class, and then also the major assignments to make sure those really hit on those pieces of why do I have to take this class? And so those are the types of things that I try to do, is to make sure that those major assignments that they submit to me are very meaningful, practical, and really hit at those learning objectives. So it's very clear to them, why do I need to do it? How it's going to be used in the future. And for me, it's like, as far as the time I had to spend on assessing them and giving them feedback, does this make sense for me to spend this much time on this particular assignment? So it's a constant process that I go through, and you just tweak it. And I try to make sure that no matter what modality I'm teaching, that these things can still stand. And so if I'm in class face-to-face or not, these assignments and these in-class activities are fine no matter what platform.
Thank you, Dr. Fields, and then we're going to close it out.
Yeah, so I'm going to echo what my colleagues just said, and then kind of see it from a different perspective, because one of the things that I really am concerned about is my students' emotional health in this period of time, given the different circumstances that they live and go through. And then of course the research talks about 1 out of every 5 young adults between the ages of 18 and 24 have during this pandemic has contemplated suicide. And so it's important for me to develop the relationship with my students where they have confidence and trust in me, and know that I'm not only looking out for their education well-being, but for their physical and emotional well-being as well. And so that they feel comfortable coming, calling, texting, phoning, emailing, whatever is necessary to get in touch with me, and where I can extend myself to be of some comfort for them.
Thank you. I want y'all to know that I've been kind of surfing the screen. I see some old friends up here. The Flukers are on, but I got a new friend. I got a new friend from this webinar today. His name is Bruce Anthony. He's given me permission to eat in the rainbow, and he said use Skittles. So Skittles it would be. All right. I'm going to give the last word to our president, Dr. Derek Rivera. Thank you, ladies, for a wonderful, wonderful seminar. And I apologize that we just didn't have enough time to just go for about 3 hours. But in the confines of the time that we had, you were, in one word, awesome. Take it away, Dr. Rivera.
Thank you all. This has been amazing, and I'd like for everyone to go down to your reaction buttons and give our panelists a virtual round of applause. They've done a phenomenal job. I also want to thank Dr. Silver for leading this group. I think he did a great of coordinating and fielding questions, and it's this kind of time that we take, as was mentioned over and over again, for ourselves to make us better, make us stronger, and help us do the service that we're here to do for our students and our institutions. So thank you all. Before we leave, I want to share our next webinar is coming up in a few short weeks. While I'm pulling that up, I think you'll be able to see it here. Is everybody, can you see that, Imani? Is that on your screen? Okay, thanks. The next iteration is a career management, when and how to transition jobs during a pandemic. And it will be moderated by our own Dr. Shantae Bolton of Tulane University. And she has assembled a panel of experts to talk to you about job transitioning. And I can tell you, there has been so much movement during this pandemic. This is a timely conversation. And I don't think there's a one amongst us who hasn't given some thought, given the craziness of what we do. Is it the time to move? Well, this conversation is going to take place November 13th at this same location. So please rejoin us, those of you who are visiting. As I was watching, it looked like we had over 60 participants riveted to their screens, paying attention and keeping up with all the good information. On November 13th, we'll do it again. So I bid you all adieu, a safe afternoon, a great weekend, and I'm leaving this experience, and I'm going to do my civic duty. I can't wait to go vote early. So folks, make sure you vote, participate in the process. Everybody take care.
Thank you.